So I'm going to go through, give my feedback on everything, and then, you know, we'll kind of go through there with the discussion point, right? Okay, so greetings, Priest. With the next alpha update, you will see that all trees within the Priest class, including the class talent tree, are receiving substantial changes in terms of pathing, arrangement, and choices. Nice. So this is big, right? Like they're acknowledging that, like, and obviously we're missing quite a lot. And this post is just like a brief, intro to this. It's not everything that's changing, but pathing's changing, where things are placed is changing, and the actual choices themselves are changing. Like this is huge, right? And everything. For the entirety of these changes, please look forward to this week's patch notes. Okay, so we'll get kind of more details later this week, but who knows when that'll be. I love how Froza is adding the, like, this kind of stuff is fun. Okay, so core tree. Original talent tree had limited choices, as it was obvious which direction you're supposed to go based on specialization. Totally agree. This is one of our main points with the tree. Love that they're calling this out. And they wanted a real block on how much throughput was available. I mean, these two sentences, if the post was just these two sentences, I'd be pretty great with that. This is already a great change, right? Those are our two biggest points, I think. While there will still be some throughput options available, which is fine, some is okay. We wanted to focus on utility options within the core tree to let the spec trees focus more on throughput. Yeah, I mean this makes perfect sense, especially if you look at the other trees. Okay, so these are the three new, I'm guessing these are going to be like the capstone nodes at the bottom of the class tree, because they're kind of, so the first one, Angelic Bulwark, this is clearly like the disc option, so, you know, probably in the disc side of the tree. When an attack brings you below 30% health, you gain an absorb shield equal to 15% of your max health for 20 seconds. You cannot occur this more than a minute and a half. Kind of interesting. I don't know how much this will get used. I mean, really, the question with a lot of these things is like, what are the choices, right? What are you giving up to get this? Obviously, this is some amount of defensive, although the 30% health threshold is pretty low, but it is something. I have a feeling this is going to be more akin to, like, I feel like PvPers are going to be more excited about this than PvEers, but, you know, we'll see what kind of where it is in the tree, right? Void Shift. So this is a current PvP talent. So you and the currently targeted party member or raid member swap health percentages. Increase the lower health percentage of the two by 25% if to 25% if below that amount, right? So you can kind of use this as like a, if you're really low, right, you can click on your tank or a heal or like whoever else, right? And get to 25% health, right?
That nice?
Or get them to 25% and then you get their health pool. I don't know. Have we ever had this in PvE? I'm not sure. So yeah, we'll see what Void Shift does. I mean, this is just exciting to have utility in the class tree that is interesting. So we'll kind of see where and when this makes sense, especially that it's kind of new. Had Void Shift in Mob. Okay, that's what I thought it was in there in Mob. Okay, cool. So I did not play Shadow in Mob, so I'm not sure how widely it was used, but obviously I think this is one of those like niche utility things that'll be interesting that all priests will have. So we'll see. Yeah, that's also, this is the really interesting part is like, obviously I'm more focused on Shadow, but this is a very interesting thing for a healing priest to get access to, right? Like, can you, like, just imagine a Mythic Plus group and someone gets targeted with Flame Wreath on Karazhan, right? And they're like dropping really low, but you don't have Flame Wreath on yourself, right? Void Shift them, right? That's, you know, basically a lay on hands for that person if you have full health, right? So I think there's a lot more cool parts about Void Shift on like the healing aspect side. I'm not sure how much use as a Shadow Priest will find, but obviously those same use cases could apply, right? Void Shift to max necrotic tank. Yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, hopefully they delete necrotic, right? So for sure, it's a very, yeah, also it's good. It's a great troll talent, which, you know, 10 out of 10. Priests love their troll talents, right? And it looks like they're keeping Holy Word Life, a word of holy power that heals the target if they're below 35% health. It heals for 400% more, and the cooldown's reduced by 20 seconds. So this spell was always kind of meh to me. I think mostly because of pathing down to it was not fun, and like you were picking up a lot of stuff like Smite, Shadow Flame Prism, or sorry, Smite and Holy Nova, and like buffing that kind of stuff, which wasn't something you'd ever do as Shadow. So hopefully when they mention that they're adjusting the pathing arrangement and choices, Holy Word Life could be more appealing. Okay, so that's the core tree. We don't know much more than that, right? Like the real question is, and people are already talking about it, right? Like, is Shadowflame Prism staying? Are they going to add different amounts of throughput? If I'm being honest, my expectation is that I wouldn't be surprised if Shadowflame Prism, Rabid Shadows, Mindbender, like, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these just get deleted or moved into the Shadow Spec tree. Just a guess. Mind Games I could see staying, just because I know it does get some, like, Disc was always had fun using it. Wouldn't be surprised if Mind Games stayed, but I mean, who knows? I would expect a lot of this other stuff to go away, like Puppet Master, Throes of Pain. I think Twist of Fate will stay. I could see the Mind Blast cooldown probably staying as well. I mean, yeah, we'll see though, right? You gotta think PIs and Twins are staying. I mean, don't know. So yeah, so we'll see, right? I mean, in order to make these changes, they're gonna have to substantially change the tree. So, we'll see what they want to do with it. But for right now, we just, we don't know. Okay, so that's the class tree. I mean, honestly, the thing is, they haven't detailed all of the changes they're making, right? They just kind of, they're calling it out. But, I mean, the big thing is here, substantial changes in terms of pathing arrangement and choices. Meaning the tree is going to look completely different, more or less to what we have now, right? So I wouldn't say anything is off the table. No, I think Door of Shadows would be sick. I would love to see that. I'm not sure if they would do that, but I think something like that would be sweet. Oh yeah, that's another good point, right? When I say removing stuff, they could easily just say Mind Games is a base pre-spell now. Or Power Infusion is a base pre-spell, right? Like, none of that is off the table either, right? Or like, Shackle Undead is baseline, Leap of Faith is baseline. Like, they could free up room on the class tree just by doing things like that, right? So we'll see. Okay, so that's the core tree. I am going to briefly talk about the Holy Tree, in case anyone here is interested in it. I'm sure a lot of you guys have been off-specking Holy, especially recently with with how good they are, so we'll just kind of briefly cover this. Our goal with Holy was to allow for further specialization into your favorite spells, whether it's increasing the power of your single target heals, AoE interactions with Prayer of Healing, Sanctify, or you just renew your entire group. We hope you find a playstyle you are to enjoy. So new thing, Prayer of Healing has a 30% chance to apply a 6-second renew to allies it heals. Okay, interesting. Wow, it's really hot, like, heal over time focus. It's kind of interesting. With the mastery, renew, the whole thing. Harmonious apparitions. Okay, so they're putting this legendary back. It's interesting, like, everyone was kind of like, well, where's the flash concentration legendary? Because everyone's like, oh, it's just so good. But yeah, not surprised it's not coming back. It's not the most fun playstyle in the world. And another, I'm assuming these are capstones. After Prayer of Mending heals 80. This is a little sussy. I don't know. Oh, it's a 2-point. Okay, that makes sense. I don't know. This is probably really bad. I don't know, dude. Holy Priests don't like power infusion, right? Yeah, I mean, we'll see what it is. Yeah, Apotheosis would be way more. Yeah, agreed. Apotheosis would be sick, actually. That'd be way more fun, I think. All right, and that's all I said for Holy. So I guess it is what it is. Okay, Discipline Tree. With this one, we aim to address a lot of the dependency issues that existed, and like Holy, address the lack of connectedness in the tree. Okay, so these are just new. Okay, so this is actually wild for anyone that's, again, obviously we care more about Shadow in here, but like, this is actually ridiculous, right? Power Word Shield now has a cooldown, and its absorb has been significantly increased. Weakened Soul has been removed. Okay, so that kind of makes sense, in the sense of like they remove Weakened Soul because they gave it a cooldown, sure. Obviously, spreading out shields is not going to be a playstyle anymore, basically. Although I wonder what this is going to do with Rapture being a thing. Or maybe it just makes Rapture better, honestly. Renew and Flash Shield can now apply Atonement. That's ridiculous. And are intended to be the primary sources of Atonement applications. So no more Shadowmend? I wonder if they just remove Shadowmend. Our aim is to allow for an individual Power Word Shield cast for each. Yeah, this is almost like making me think that they could remove Shadowmend entirely and remove anything in the class tree that has to do with Shadowmend and just make Flash Shield be our baseline heal spell again. Individual shields should be more valuable, as well as reducing frustration surrounding the Weakened Soul debuff. So what's really the curiosity is like, assuming, like, they put this under the disc tree though. I'm assuming this applies to Holy and Shadow as well? Because Holy and Shadow also have Power Word Shield, right? If so, this is actually potentially a massive survivability thing for Shadow, right? Depending on how big that shield is. But it's just weird because like our tree has Shadowmend, 3 things that deal with Shadowmend over here, which kind of feel weird. It made sense in the class tree when both Disc and Shadow liked the spell in a sense, but now it's like, well, why do you even have 2 then, right? Like, why does Shadowmend exist, I guess? Yeah, I know it says Discipline Tree, but that's just a... Power Shield is just a baseline spell. So it's possible we might get that changed as well. Okay, new talent, Expiation. Increases the damage of Mind Blast and Shadow or Death by 10 and 20%. Mind Blast and Shadow or Death consume 3 to 6 seconds of Shadow or Pain or Purge the Wicked, instantly dealing that damage. This is kind of like... This is not the first talent that we'll see here that's dealing with Shadow or Death and Mind Blast. This kind of leads me to believe that I don't know if Shadow Flame Prism is going to be removed, because it does kind of feel like if they're going to make Shadow Flame Prism baseline, they want to give you more reasons to press Mind Blast and Shadow or Death as all specs. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the mind spiky aspect of consuming dots has never really appealed to me, but I mean, that's interesting. Okay, Aegis of Wrath. Powered Shield absorbs 30% additional damage, but the absorb amount decays by 3% every 1 second. Huh, interesting. It's kind of... This could potentially be really reward good players if you get your timings down, right? It's kind of a cool thing. And Divine Aegis. Critically heals create a protective shield around the target, absorbing 15% of the amount healed. Lasts for 15 seconds. Critical heals with powered shields for 15... Yeah, this is potentially disgustingly OP, so... does that make Rapture insane? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not a Disc Priest. I just like reading these are interesting. I'm sure Disc players have some thoughts, but I don't have much more than... It's intriguing. Okay, and now the main event. Okay, so the Shadow Tree. Shadows received the largest batch of changes among the group. Our initial aim was to address dungeon gameplay surrounding Searing Nightmare. Here's a few changes that we expect will improve Shadow's dungeon gameplay. Okay, so this is effectively a soft rework of the spec, right? So we'll go over that why in a second. So Shadow Crash now applies Empiric Touch to 4 targets. So this is, we have a way to spread Empiric Touch now. It's only to 4 targets. That being said, they could make Shadow Crash a lower cooldown. They could give it 2 charges. Because like baseline, that's not very many targets. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do. Well, maybe our dots just tick harder, right? So this is okay. But yeah, the questions about like, why is it capped? Why isn't it 8 targets? Like, we're just going to kind of have to play with it and see how it is, right? I mean, that's the thing. I've never been a big fan of Shadow Crash. So, curious to see how this will play. But yeah, we'll see. Dark Void is coming back. Deals damage to your target and nearby enemies. I'm assuming this was not target capped at all in BFA, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it was target capped in terms of its damage or Shadow or Pain. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, it was all. Yeah, so I think if Dark Void is only going to be 8 targets, it needs to have a much lower cooldown than 30 seconds. Otherwise, I don't quite get why it's target capped. So it's definitely intriguing, although I'm not quite sure about the target caps on either of these spells. The other point that I mentioned before, like when the stream was first starting, so having damage spells that spread our dots is fine, right? That's what Searing Nightmare was, right? What I'm a little concerned about is how this affects our mastery scaling and like how much we care about mastery, because now effectively you have 2 spells that are meant as like spreading abilities and not necessarily the bulk of your AoE damage, because there's a high enough... So basically what this means is Shadow Crash and Dark Void will hit targets that do not get dots, right? Meaning they will do less damage because of that, right? So it doesn't... And this, like, Searing Nightmare had the same problem, right? But it was countered by the fact that Searing Nightmare didn't really have a cooldown. You could just effectively spam it, right? And it spread Shadow or Pain to all targets. So I'm a little concerned with the target caps on both of these guys and how that'll play with our mastery and, like, just in general how it feels to play with them. I think it would feel better if they keep the current cooldowns, because is Shadow Crash 20 seconds? What is it now? 23 at the moment. Okay, 30 seconds replay haste. Okay, that's what I thought. So if they're gonna keep that cooldown of, like, let's just say 25 to 30 seconds depending on your haste, right? Whatever, or obviously it can go lower, but it's the start of an expansion. And 30 seconds for Dark Void. I think I would rather be spreading dots to all the targets. Like, I think those cooldowns are so long that for the majority of people doing keys, the pull will be done by the time their cooldowns come back. Right? I mean, obviously when you push keys, you'll get multiple casts of Dark Void and Shadow Crash, but I think for the majority of people doing dungeons, 20 to 30 seconds is kind of the average duration of a trash pack, right? So I don't quite like why they're target capping them here. I mean, we'll see how the rest of the spec plays in addition to these changes, but I think that's my kind of gut reaction to that, is like, with cooldowns as long as they are currently for these spells, capping their target counts for dot spreading, I don't know if it's going to feel very good. New spell, Pain of Death. So Shadow of Death deals 20% of its damage to all targets affected by your Shadow of Pain within 40 yards. So that's what I was saying before. They're kind of adding more stuff into Shadow Word Death that's going to make you want to press it more often if you talent into this, right? Kind of interesting. It's basically like our AoE is slowly turning into spread your dots, Psychic Link, Shadow Word Death with this new talent, and just you're kind of spreading. You have funnel on one target, and you do, you know, cleave offset damage from that one target, right? Which is unlike how most things in the game work AoE wise, right? Yeah, exactly. So with this other point, they were saying the dots won't last long enough to where the spell comes back on cooldown, right? The question with that is like, are they doing anything with Void Bolt? Is Void Bolt getting any changes to make sustaining the dots easier after you've applied them? Like, yeah, not sure. Or they could also apply Rotten Wither has a chance to extend Vampiric Touch and Shattered Pain. You know, they could buff this, right? And then they're just kind of pointing out that Mind Blast damage can be increased through a few talents. So it seems like they definitely kind of want us to go. I mean, we'll see how much of these are choices, but it seems like their build is going to be kind of spread your dots and then funnel in on one target, and a percentage of that funnel damage will get replicated to targets with your dots. I'm not sure, like, I think in theory that's okay, although I don't know how much I like that it's just Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death. Part of me kind of wishes, like, because that's going to make it really weird of, like, when do you press Void Bolt, right? When do you press Devouring Plague, right? Versus Mind Sear and those kinds of questions. So, yeah, I guess we'll kind of see how that works out, right? And then this one's huge. So Mind Sear now costs Insanity instead of generating Insanity, and they increase its damage. So like theoretically, they're kind of pitching this like, you know, you're not going to press Devouring Plague in AoE. Instead, you're going to spend your Insanity on a big Mind Sear. I'm not sure how that will work, especially with like how our Insanity generation will feel in AoE, but it could help with the traffic problem a little bit. In AoE, but yeah, we'll see. This is kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. Mind Sear not being a filler. They're basically saying, nope, Mind Sear's not a filler anymore. You're pressing this thing to do big damn. So we'll see. Yeah. So the question with this is Mind Sear consuming Insanity per cast or per tick? Right. I think ideally it's at per tick. That's what I mean. It's awkward if you need to move. So like, that would mean if you consume the Insanity on cast, that would be terrible. we do not want that. We want to consume Insanity per tick, and that way if you do have to move, it's not that big of a deal, right? The AoE rotation is going to be basically spread your dots, do your single target rotation, and then consume Insanity on Mind Sear. That's how it looks. So it's going to be an interesting balance of like how often we're Mind Searing versus doing the other things in our kit. So yeah, we'll see. And like, keep in mind, right? If the idols stay in place, right? Specifically Idol of N'Zoth, right? If we still have Idol of N'Zoth, this could still be pretty huge, right? Because they're giving us more ways to spread Vampiric Touch and Shadow, and I guess spreading Shadow Word Pain just got harder because we don't have Searing Nightmare anymore, but we do have Vampiric Touch. So part of our AoE is probably also still going to involve this, but I guess we'll see to what extent, right? Yeah, Gondon, what's up, man? We don't know if Shadowflame Prism is sticking around. I will say, here's a few changes that we expect will improve Shadow's gameplay. So they're basically just talking about improvements. They didn't mention Shadowflame Prism, whether it's staying or being removed. Like, we don't know yet, right? We don't know. Yeah, these changes are coming, they said this week, but we don't have, these are only part of the changes, right? That's the biggest thing to take away from this. This is not a comprehensive list. This is just the tip of the iceberg is what it's sounding like, right? Okay, and then this is the big one, right? Let's make sure everyone can see this. Let's make sure everyone can see this. It's gone. It's dead. Ugh. Ugh. Soak it in, everybody. We've made it. It's gone. It's gone. We've done it. It's dead. It's dead. I've already removed it from SimC. It's the first thing I did as soon as I saw this. So yes, this is gone. We're not, this is not a thing anymore. So there you go. Okay, so this is the section on AoE, right? So they're like, here's a few changes that they expect will improve Shadow's AoE, right? So that's the section, right? That's like point number 1. They're reworking a good portion of our kit and our tree to change the way we do AoE. This is great. And this is the other stuff, right? So they also discussed a design where Voidform is not central to the spec. Prior to Legion, the spec had its share of fun talents and abilities that we have modernized and brought into the talent tree, including Mind Spike and Dark Evangelism. Meaning both of these are not the only ones. These are not the only things coming back. That's what this is saying. This could easily mean Divine Star, Cascade, Halo, Clarity of Power, right? Like some of these old talents could easily be coming back, right? We don't know. They're going to try. It's a goal of theirs that if you don't want to play with Voidform, you don't have to. I don't know what this means. This could mean lots of different things, right? I think my biggest concern with this is it's going to be very hard to make Voidform an alternative to Voidform not just super bad, because Voidform by itself gives you mastery on all of your targets. So like your Shadow Crashes, your Dark Void, your Idol of N'Zoth, like all of that damage is getting the full benefit of all 3 dots, right? That's so much damage. Like that's a very big deal. And on top of that, you get Hungering Void and Ancient Madness, right? If that's part of the tree stays the same. So like Voidform is kind of a super cooldown the way our spec tree is laid out right now. A mastery rework is probably not out of the picture, and there's a good solid chance I wouldn't be surprised if things like Hungering Void and Ancient Madness go away as well. Because like if they want Voidform to be optional, or at least have places where it's like, oh, you know what? I don't want to be a cooldown spec for this. I'm not going to take my cooldown, and instead I'll have other things to get instead. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's a very ambitious goal. I mean, we'll see how it works out, though. I'm a little skeptic, I'll be honest. And then, so they're saying they're going to bring back Mind Spike and Dark Evangelism. Let's look at Mind Spike. Okay, Mind Spike. Assail the target with shadowy spikes, dealing damage, and leaving a spike embedded in their mind. Mind Blast detonates each spike, each one dealing original damage to their target. Generates 4 insanity. Right? That's a version of Mind Spike. Are they bringing this one back? I don't know. Like this is like AoE Mind Spike, right? So the previous one, and this is what we had in WoD, blasts the target with damage, but removes your shadow damage over time effects from the target in the process, right? So I'm a little concerned with, like, I think this version of Mind Spike could be very interesting because it's not removing dots. It feels more thematic to the spec. I was never a big fan of Mind Spike removing dots. Like the Clarity of Power playstyle in WoD, like I liked it for a tier, but I was kind of fed up with it after that, right? Anyone that says otherwise, I think is kidding themselves, personally. And I also don't think it fits in the modern version of the game. Just my 2 cents. I mean, we'll see. They can prove me wrong, but I think the thing is to keep in mind, right? Our dots do way more than they used to in some versions. They also do less than they used to in some cases, right? Like they do more in the sense that our mastery directly goes against a version of Mind Spike where it's removing our dots, right? And you saw this in the current game with Painbreaker Psalm. Painbreaker Psalm was a legendary that I'm guessing literally no one crafted this entire expansion because it removed your dots. It like actively went against what you were trying to do, was to keep dot uptime so that your mastery was working, right? So I'd be pretty concerned with putting something back in the game that extinguishes the dots without reworking the mastery. I don't think they make sense together. That being said, I mean, they could make that kind of clash of ideas, kind of like that's how the spec functions or how it, but I think there's a real danger in that, like, the spec could be actively fighting against itself, which I don't think is healthy game design. Painbreaker is sick in PvP. I think you guys are trolling me. No one plays Shadow in PvP. Come on, stop lying to yourselves. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see what that means. So that's Mind Spike. I'm definitely a little bit more. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm a little hesitant. I think some version of Mind Spike coming back could be interesting though. The other thing that they said is coming back is Dark Evangelism. It could be some version of this. Okay, so for our purposes, when you cast Mind Flay, you gain Evangelism. Stacks up to X amount of time. Lasts for 20 seconds. Some iterations it's been 15 seconds. When you cast Mind Flay, you get a buff for X amount of time. Increase the damage done of your periodic cells by 2%. So yeah, it's kind of just like, you know, press Mind Flay, get damage kind of thing. We'll see. I mean, I think the coolest thing is that this is my favorite part of this. And I think it's silly that like this is the thing that people love, but like this kind of just people love this stuff, man. This is what it looks like when you have the stacks up. Man, dude. How can you not love this? I mean, it's just so good. So, like, the interesting part about this, with us spreading our dots in AoE, this also means Mind Flay will have, like, a purpose in AoE as well. I'll be interested to see if, like, Mind Sear, for example, also stacks this. So, yeah, very excited to see what this could look like. Rotationally, I feel like we're still missing a big chunk of the picture, and I think it's going to be very hard to, like, pull Voidform and therefore Void Bolt out of the spec as like a central part of it, which is probably something that we've been building up to for the last couple of expansions anyways, right? But and we'll see what happens, you know. And I hope that they're conscious of this, right? In the sense that like buffing Mind Flay is really challenging, because I think like that's what you're saying, like Mind Flay is so useless, right? But it's like, isn't that okay? Like, how much power do you want to throw into the filler of your rotation, right? Because the issue is the more you buff the filler, you're also theoretically nerfing anything else you could be doing, because the filler has no cooldown and can be pressed whenever you want. So that's why I think you got to be kind of careful with that. But I think something like this design is okay because it does last for 20 seconds. So it's just going to be some maintenance buff effectively if it comes back in this kind of an iteration. Like, I don't mind Voidform. I think what I mind about it is that, like, you know, it feels kind of overwhelming if you get too much haste or too much insanity kind of flowing into you at a time. Like, that feels kind of iffy. I also don't like that its cooldown is 1.5 minutes and it doesn't sync well with Power Infusion, right? Like, I think it has some challenges, but I don't know if I'm, like, kind of into the idea of, like, a non-void form spec. Like, it kind of sounds kind of boring, right? But we'll see. I mean, I'll try it out, you know? Yeah, I mean, balancing around Void Bolt, Void Form has been hard, so, I mean, we'll see what they want to do, right? Yeah, exactly. I think what Gondon said is interesting. Like, go back and play BC or Wrath versions of Shadow Priest. Like, it is way more boring than what we have now, right? So, like, I'm always a little cautious when they're like, let's go back to something like that. But obviously, I think pulling from those ideas could be interesting. But and I think the interesting part of it is, I think if they were going to do that, reworking Mastery would for sure be like kind of step one, I think. And then step two would be like bringing back some version of Mind Spike, which doesn't sound like it's off the table, so we'll see. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, the PvP implications of Void Eruption are for sure different than PvE. I think so giving players an option for that is for sure going to be interesting. You know, I don't know. Well, I guess I'm struggling. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm struggling to see a world where it's like, why would you not want to have a cooldown in PvE like Voidform? Or like, what would you get by giving that up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know what the answer to that is, other than pressing Mind Flay more, you know? Yeah, do you spend more time refreshing dots? The likely answer is you spend more time pressing Mind Flay, right? But maybe that's kind of like the Mind Spike Clarity of Power thing coming back, right? I do think it's interesting how they did mention Mind Spike coming back. They didn't say anything about Clarity of Power. It's probably safe to assume Clarity of Power is not coming back. I feel like if they were going to bring it back, they would have probably mentioned it, but who knows? Yeah, that's the other thing, right? We definitely want to line up our cooldown. Like, if they keep Void Form, which if they are keeping it, it's just going to be optional. I really hope the cooldown is synced up with Power Infusion better. But the interesting part is, if they bring this back and it replaces Mind Flay, it kind of, like, shifts the problem that I was saying earlier on its head a little bit, because one of the complaints that we had was like there's too many things in here that are buffing Mind Flay, right? And buffing a filler is dangerous. That's what I keep saying, you know, right? But if Mind Spike is coming back and Mind Spike is replacing Mind Flay, well, suddenly some of these talents if they start working with Mind Spike, could become more interesting. I don't know. I mean, we'll see, right? We'll also see where they put it. I don't know. We appreciate the abundance of feedback given and your patience as we worked on bringing the priest talent trees in line with our current design philosophy. I mean, like, this is what we were saying, right? Like, it was obvious that the way that the priest talent tree was laid out just looks so different in philosophy to how the newer trees were coming out. You can kind of tell it was probably worked on much earlier than some of the newer trees like Shaman or Hunter, Rogue, that kind of thing, right? They will continue to monitor feedback in the coming weeks as we fix bugs, as we bug fix and finish implementation on these last few talents. Okay, yeah, so this is important, right? Frozo is saying that it's not quite done yet. You'll see patch notes this week. Not everything is working yet, so don't expect like a fully fleshed out build this week. So yeah, our two, we still have 2 insanity spenders. We have Devouring Plague for single target, and then you have Mind Sear for AoE, right? And this is kind of what I was saying earlier, but I was like, removing Searing Nightmare is harder than just saying it's gone, right? Because Searing Nightmare is such a large chunk of our damage that removing it is not, it's not an easy thing to do, right? So it's going to be like, use these spells to spread your dots and kind of go from there, right? I mean, the question is, how often are you channeling Mind Sear, right? Like, we will be generating far less, or I don't want to say far less. We'll be generating less insanity in AoE because we don't have Mind Sear. Like, Mind Sear is such a large chunk of our insanity generation and a key, right? So if we just look at, I'm going to pick the unfair choice and just look at a lower Karazhan. Okay, so we're removing this this is gone, right? So that's the question. How do we generate insanity in AoE now? We generate it with all the other stuff, right? Everything else. I think apparitions are probably gonna, I don't know. I mean, we'll see, right? Like that's the difference, is that you will have less insanity, right? Quite a considerable amount. So, but the balance of like how much you're getting, how often you press Mind Sear, I think is going to be a challenging balance. Yeah, I mean, they could buff apparitions for sure, and that talent, it probably needs it anyway. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, including myself, aren't the biggest fans of Shadow Crash. I mean, we'll see how it plays in this version, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it either. The thing is, I know a lot of people do like it, so it's hard, but yeah, agreed. I think what I want is put Divine Star, Halo, and Cascade as a 3-point choice in the talent tree. And then in the Shadow tree, have an optional talent that's like, hey, whichever one of those you picked, it now spreads Shadow or Pain. Or Vampiric Touch, whatever, like, you know. I think I'd rather have that. Using holy spells as Shadow is omega cringe, dude. I'm gonna change your mind right here, right now. Yeah, I think it should be more targets, or it should be uncapped. It depends on the cooldown, right? Like, it applying to 4 targets is actually fine if it has a 5-second cooldown. You know, like, well, who cares? So I think it's gonna be a balance, though. Look how cool that is. They just made it purple. Yeah. So Cascade, Halo, and Divine Star all have shadowy versions of those spells. Like, they've been in the game forever, right? So you say that they're, quote, holy spells, but, you know, they have versions of both. So yeah, that's, I mean, this is interesting. I know, like, a lot of people are a little upset that, like we want more things, right? A lot of people are very happy about Searing Nightmare going away. Yeah, I think what people are upset about is, or not upset, but I think it's hard to just be like, hey, there's more stuff coming. Just hold out for it, right? People are just impatient. I'm not saying unrightfully so to some degree, right? They definitely have some interesting directions going. I can't really say if it's the right direction without playing with it. And I think if I said that, I would be disingenuous a little bit to both sides. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, like, we don't know what we're giving up for this yet, right? Like, we don't know. Yeah, Prism solves a lot of problems. It also can introduce problems. So I think there's a chance that with the rework of the spec, effectively, it could feel more fun on AoE than people think it is now. It's concerning that this version of VA getting shit with the class trees and mentioned it. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a light post, right? Like, there's probably a lot more happening, right? But it's like, I don't know. I think, like, they're probably trying to balance. I don't envy them in this position, right? Like, do they spend a day writing a post and detailing all the things that are changing? Or do they spend that time making a very short post for, like, an hour and then spending the rest of their day finishing the implementation so we can see it all sooner? You know, like, like, this is a developer making this post. This isn't a community, what's it called? They have, like, community guys out there, right? Like, which is maybe part of the problem. And I agree, I wish we had more, but it's kind of what we have, right?